Captain Elena Rodriguez was having a normal Tuesday morning when everything changed. She was sitting in her quarters aboard the exploration ship Defiant Hope, drinking coffee and reviewing star charts for their next survey mission. The ship was quiet, with most of the crew still asleep during the night shift. Elena enjoyed these peaceful moments before the day began. Then the emergency alarm started blaring throughout the ship. Elena nearly spilled her coffee as she jumped up and rushed toward the bridge. The alarm meant they had detected something urgent, possibly dangerous. In 15 years of commanding exploration vessels, Elena had learned that emergencies in deep space were never good news. "Captain on the bridge," announced Lieutenant Mike Thompson as Elena hurried through the doors. Mike was young but reliable, and he looked genuinely worried as he worked at the communications station. "What do we have, Mike?" Elena asked, settling into her command chair. "Distress signal, Captain. Very weak, coming from the edge of our sensor range. But there is something strange about it." Mike's fingers moved quickly over his controls, trying to clean up the transmission. "The signal is not coming from any known human colony or ship." Elena frowned. They were in a remote sector of space, far from the main shipping lanes. Finding any kind of signal out here was unusual, but finding an alien distress call was almost unheard of. "Can you get a clearer signal?" she asked. Mike worked for several minutes, adjusting frequencies and filtering out cosmic interference. Slowly, a voice emerged from the static. It was clearly not human, speaking in a language that their universal translator struggled to interpret. "This is Elder Thainera of the Kethani settlement on Verdania 7, the translated voice said, filled with desperation and fear. "We are under attack. Our cities are burning. The hegemony ships are in orbit above us, and they are targeting our evacuation transports. We have sent distress calls to everyone we can reach. The Galactic Council, the Trade Federation, even our former allies in the Centauri Alliance. Nobody is coming. Nobody will help us." The transmission crackled with static, and Elena could hear explosions in the background. Whatever was happening to these people, it was happening right now. "Please," the voice continued, "if anyone receives this message, if anyone out there still believes in helping others, we are dying. Our children are dying. The hegemony says we are unworthy of existence because we will not surrender our knowledge to become their slaves." The transmission dissolved into static, then silence. Elena stared at the communications console, her mind racing. She had never heard of the Kethani before, but the desperation in that alien voice was unmistakable. Someone was committing genocide while the rest of the galaxy looked the other way. Dr. Rebecca Hayes, the ship's science officer, looked up from her station with grim news. "Captain, I am detecting massive energy signatures in that sector. Multiple large ships and what looks like orbital bombardment patterns." First Officer James Carter spoke up from his position near the tactical station. "Captain, what about our orders? Command specifically told us to avoid any conflict zones in this sector. Getting involved in alien wars is against regulations." Elena knew James was right. Earth's military had strict policies about interfering in conflicts between alien species. Humanity was still considered a minor power in galactic politics, and starting fights with advanced civilizations was a good way to get Earth invaded. But as she listened to the static where the desperate voice had been, Elena found she did not care about regulations. "Set course for Verdania 7, maximum warp speed," she ordered. "Captain, that is a direct violation of our standing orders," James protested. "We could all face court-martial for this." Elena turned to look at her first officer. James was a good man and a competent officer, but sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. "Then they can court-martial me when we get back," Elena said firmly. "But I am not going to sit here and listen to people being slaughtered while we worry about paperwork." The Defiant Hope jumped to warp speed, racing toward a star system that Elena had never heard of to help people she had never met. As they traveled, Dr. Hayes briefed her on what little information they had about the Kethani. "They are a peaceful agricultural species, Captain. Known throughout the galaxy for their ability to make dead planets bloom with life. Their terraforming technology is supposed to be incredible. They can turn a barren rock into a garden world in just a few years." "That sounds like something worth protecting," Elena said. "It also sounds like something other people might want to steal," added Lieutenant Thompson grimly. When the Defiant Hope dropped out of warp at the edge of the Verdania system, Elena felt her heart sink. The scene before them was worse than anything she had imagined. 3 massive alien warships hung in orbit around the planet like metal vultures. These had to be the hegemony vessels the distress call had mentioned. They were enormous, easily 10 times the size of Elena's exploration ship, and their weapons were still glowing from recent use. The planet below showed the scars of orbital bombardment. What had once been cities were now smoking craters. Rivers had been boiled away, and vast sections of the planet's surface were nothing but charred wasteland. "My God," whispered Dr. Hayes as she studied her sensor readings. "They are not just conquering this world. They are destroying it completely." "Captain, I am detecting life signs," reported Lieutenant Thompson urgently. "A large group of survivors hiding in the northern mountain range. They are about 300 kilometers from the main bombardment zone." Elena did not hesitate. "Prepare for rescue operations. I want landing shuttles ready and emergency medical supplies loaded immediately." "Captain," James said quietly, "those hegemony ships will detect us the moment we enter the atmosphere. Our ship is not designed for combat." "Then we better be fast and smart about this," Elena replied. "Because those people down there have been abandoned by everyone else. I will not be the one to abandon them too." The rescue operation was the most dangerous thing Elena had ever attempted. Using the planet's mountain ranges to block sensor detection, her shuttles managed to reach the survivors while the hegemony ships were on the far side of the planet. What they found broke Elena's heart. Hundreds of alien beings huddled in caves and makeshift shelters, many of them injured, all of them terrified. The Kethani were tall and graceful, with blue-green skin and large eyes that showed incredible sadness. Elder Thainera was among the survivors, an elderly female whose normally vibrant skin had turned pale with shock and grief. When she saw Elena and her crew, she began to weep. "You came?" she whispered in amazement. "Someone actually came." "We heard your distress call," Elena said gently. "We are here to take you somewhere safe." As Elena's crew worked to evacuate the survivors, Elder Thainera told her the full horror of what had happened. The Kethani had been under attack for months, with one colony after another being destroyed. Their crime was refusing to surrender their agricultural technology to become slaves of the hegemony empire. "We sent pleas for help to every civilization we had treaties with," Thainera explained as they loaded refugees onto the shuttles. "Species we had helped, planets we had restored to life, allies we had trusted for centuries. Every single one of them turned their backs on us the moment the hegemony made their intentions clear." Elena felt anger building in her chest. "What? Why would they abandon you?" "Fear," Thainera said simply. "The hegemony is powerful and we are not. In this galaxy, the weak have learned that they truly have nobody when the strong decide to destroy them." As the last shuttle loaded with refugees prepared to leave the dying planet, Elena took one final look at what had been the Kethani homeworld. Beautiful cities had been reduced to rubble. Vast gardens that had taken generations to grow were now ash and smoke. But the 300 survivors in her cargo bay were alive, and that was what mattered. As the Defiant Hope slipped away from the Verdania system, Elder Thainera sat in the ship's observation lounge, staring out at the stars. Elena found her there looking lost and broken. "Elder," Elena said softly, "I am setting course for Earth. My people will decide what to do next, but I promise you this, you will not be abandoned again." Thainera looked at Elena with eyes that had seen too much tragedy. "Why did you risk everything to save us? Your species owes us nothing. You barely even knew we existed." Elena thought about that question for a long moment. "Because it was the right thing to do," she said finally. "And because everybody deserves someone willing to stand up for them when things get dark." As the Defiant Hope headed toward Earth with its cargo of refugees, Elena knew she was about to cause an interstellar incident. But she also knew that sometimes doing the right thing was more important than following orders. The Kethani had been abandoned by everyone they trusted. Now it was time to see what humanity was really made of. President Michael Chen had seen many crises during his time in office, but nothing had prepared him for the emergency session he was about to lead. The massive chamber of the United Earth Council was packed with representatives from every nation and colony, their faces reflecting the gravity of the situation they were about to discuss. On the main screens around the chamber, images from Verdania played in horrifying detail. Burning cities, destroyed landscapes, and the desperate faces of Kethani refugees filled the displays. The story had been spreading across human news networks for 3 days since Captain Elena Rodriguez had brought the survivors to Earth. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Chin began, his voice carrying the weight of the moment, "we are here to decide humanity's response to what can only be called genocide. The Kethani people have been systematically destroyed by the hegemony empire while the rest of the galaxy chose to look the other way." Secretary of State Lisa Park stood to present the official galactic response. "Mr. President, the Galactic Council has sent us a formal demand. They want us to return the Kethani refugees immediately. They claim that harboring them constitutes an act of aggression against the hegemony empire. Angry murmurs filled the chamber. Many representatives were clearly outraged by the demand, but others looked worried about the implications of defying such powerful alien civilizations. What about our military situation? President Chen asked Admiral Patricia Rodriguez, Earth's highest-ranking military commander and Elena's aunt. Admiral Rodriguez's expression was serious as she addressed the assembly. Mr. President, I need to be completely honest about what we are facing. The hegemony empire has one of the largest and most advanced fleets in the galaxy. Their technology is at least 2 generations ahead of ours, and they outnumber our entire space force by more than 50 to 1. She activated a tactical display showing the comparative strength of the two forces. The difference was staggering. Earth's entire military looked like a small local police force compared to the hegemony's massive war machine. In a direct military confrontation, Admiral Rodriguez continued, our chances of survival would be extremely limited. We are talking about facing an empire that has conquered hundreds of star systems. The chamber fell quiet as representatives absorbed this sobering assessment. Earth had always known it was a minor player in galactic politics, but seeing the numbers laid out so clearly was deeply unsettling. Dr. Kevin Walsh from the Science Division stepped forward to present a different perspective. Mr. President, while our military disadvantage is real, we have been studying the Kethani refugees and their technology. What we have learned is remarkable. He activated displays showing complex biological structures and terraforming processes. The Kethani possess agricultural and terraforming technology that is truly revolutionary. They can transform dead worlds into garden planets in a matter of years, not the decades or centuries it takes with our current methods. Representative David Kim from the Pacific Coalition raised his hand. Dr. Walsh, are you suggesting this technology could be valuable to us? I am saying it could be valuable to everyone, Dr. Walsh replied. The Kethani have offered to share this knowledge freely with anyone who provides them sanctuary. We could solve food shortages, expand human settlement to previously uninhabitable worlds, and revolutionize our approach to space colonization. Elder Thainera had been invited to address the council, and now she stood to speak. Despite everything she had been through, the elderly Kethani maintained a dignity that commanded respect. Leaders of Earth, she began, her translated voice carrying both sadness and hope, my people do not ask you to fight our battles for us. We know the cost would be terrible. If you choose to return us to the hegemony, we will understand. We have learned that in this galaxy, survival often requires difficult choices. She paused, looking around the chamber at the human faces watching her. But if you choose to help us, know that we offer not just our knowledge but our eternal gratitude. We would become your allies in truth, not just in words. President Chen looked around the chamber, studying the faces of humanity's leaders. He could see fear in many eyes, but he also saw something else that gave him hope. He saw anger at the injustice they had witnessed, and determination to do what was right regardless of the cost. Let me be absolutely clear about our options, Chen said, standing to address the full assembly. We can surrender these refugees to almost certain death, maintaining our neutrality and our safety in the short term. Or we can do what we believe is right, knowing that it may cost us everything we have built. Representative Maria Santos from the American Federation was the first to stand. Mr. President, these people have been abandoned by every civilization they trusted. If we turn our backs on them too, what does that say about who we are as human beings? It says we value our own comfort over doing what is right, added Representative Jennifer Walsh from the European Union. And I refuse to leave that legacy for our children. One by one, representatives began standing throughout the chamber. Some spoke about human values and moral obligations. Others talked about the practical benefits of Kethani technology. But all of them came to the same conclusion. Representative Robert Chin from the Asian Alliance put it simply, if we abandon them now, we become no better than the civilizations that already turned their backs. That is not who humans are. When the vote was called, the result was unanimous. Not a single representative voted to surrender the refugees. President Chen's response to the Galactic Council was carefully crafted but unmistakably clear. He recorded it personally, knowing that his words would be broadcast across the galaxy on every available communication channel. To the leaders of the Galactic Council and the Hegemony Empire, Chen said, looking directly into the camera, the people of Earth have made their decision. We will not surrender innocent refugees to face genocide. To the Kethani survivors and to any species facing extinction while others turn away in fear, we say this: you are not alone. We stand with you. The reaction to Earth's declaration was immediate and intense. The Hegemony Empire responded with threats of swift military action. The Galactic Council expressed what they called deep concern about Earth's dangerous destabilization of galactic peace. But Admiral Rodriguez was already mobilizing Earth's fleet, working with Dr. Walsh and the Kethani scientists to understand their new alien allies' capabilities. Captain Elena Rodriguez, who had started this crisis by rescuing the refugees, was promoted to admiral and given command of a new joint task force. Elena, Admiral Patricia Rodriguez told her niece privately after the vote, "What you did when you rescued those people was either the bravest or the most foolish thing in human history. We are about to find out which one." As news of Earth's decision spread throughout the galaxy, reactions varied dramatically. The major powers were outraged and concerned about the precedent this set. But in the outer regions of space, among species that had been dismissed as unimportant or ignored by the galactic establishment, something different began to happen. If Earth, small and technologically inferior Earth, could stand up to the mighty Hegemony Empire, perhaps other minor species could find the courage to speak up too. Perhaps the galaxy's forgotten peoples did not have to accept their fate quietly. Messages began arriving through secret channels. Small species offering resources, hidden colonies providing intelligence, and nomadic fleets volunteering to help transport supplies. Earth's simple declaration that no one should face extinction alone was resonating with civilizations that had been waiting for someone to say those words. The Hegemony had built their empire on the assumption that the weak would always bow to the strong. But they had never encountered an enemy that refused to accept that basic principle. They were about to learn what happened when someone finally said, "Enough," and meant it. In hidden bases throughout the galaxy, species that had been marginalized and ignored for centuries began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding and start fighting back. Earth had thrown down the gauntlet. Now the question was whether anyone else would be brave enough to pick it up. The first secret message arrived on a Tuesday morning, transmitted through channels so hidden that Captain Elena Rodriguez almost missed it entirely. She was reviewing supply reports aboard her flagship New Dawn when Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell called her attention to an unusual encrypted transmission. "Captain, we are receiving a communication through what appears to be black market smuggling frequencies," Ryan reported from his station. "The sender claims to represent the Zephyrian nomad fleets." Elena frowned. The Zephyrians were a species that lived entirely in space, traveling in massive fleets of converted asteroid ships. Most galactic governments considered them barely civilized wanderers who survived by scavenging and small-time trading. "Put it through," Elena ordered. The voice that came through the translator was gravelly and rough, clearly not used to formal communication protocols. "Human vessel New Dawn, this is Commander Zektar of the 7th Wandering Fleet. We have heard the words your people spoke to the Kethani survivors. We carry rare metals and refined materials that your people need for building ships and weapons. We offer trade in secret if you are willing." Elena exchanged glances with her communications officer. "How did they know we needed those materials?" "Everyone knows, Captain," came Zektar's amused reply. "Word travels fast through the smuggling networks. The Hegemony has put pressure on official suppliers to refuse trade with Earth. But there are other ways to get what you need." Over the next week, similar messages began arriving daily. Each one was from a different species that the major galactic powers had dismissed as unimportant or irrelevant. "Captain, this is incredible," Ryan reported during their morning briefing. "We have received 43 different offers of assistance. The Ironback mining collectives want to trade refined metals for food supplies. The Aquarian deep-sea colonies are offering to share their defensive technologies. Even some of the smaller human colonies outside Council jurisdiction are sending support." Dr. Rebecca Hayes looked up from her science station with growing excitement. "Captain, if even half of these species are serious about helping us, we could actually have a real chance against the Hegemony fleet." Back on Earth, engineer Marcus Webb was having the time of his life working with Kethani biotechnology. Their ability to grow living structures that could adapt and evolve was completely unlike anything human science had ever developed. "Admiral Rodriguez, you need to see this," Marcus said excitedly as he demonstrated a small device that looked like a metallic flower. "The Kethani call it a growth seed. You plant this in dead soil, and within just a few days it starts converting the entire environment to support life." Admiral Patricia Rodriguez studied the device with interest. "That is remarkable, but how does it help us fight the Hegemony?" Marcus's eyes lit up with possibility. "I have been thinking about that. What if we could adapt this technology for military defense? Living armor that repairs itself when it gets damaged. weapon systems that adapt to enemy countermeasures in real time. Even starships that can literally grow new components as they need them. "You are talking about technology that evolves during battle?" the Admiral said slowly. "Exactly. The hegemony's main advantage is their superior technology, but what if we could build technology that gets better the more they fight it? What if our defenses learned from every attack and became stronger?" Meanwhile, Elder Thainera had become an unlikely diplomat, using her people's vast network of agricultural contacts to build something that had never existed before. She was creating an alliance of species that the major powers had written off as unimportant. The secret meeting took place in an abandoned mining station in a remote asteroid field. Representatives from over 20 different species gathered in the station's converted cargo bay, their various forms creating an incredible display of galactic diversity. "For too long we have accepted our place as minor species," Elder Thainera addressed the gathering. "We have allowed the great powers to decide our fates while we scramble for whatever scraps they throw us. But Earth has shown us something different. They have shown us what it means to say enough is enough." Commander Zektar spoke through his universal translator. "Human ships are small but very fast. Our Zephyrian fleets are large but lightly armed. Working together we could protect trade routes that the hegemony cannot patrol effectively." The Aquarian delegate, speaking through a water-filled communication sphere, added her species' perspective. "Our defensive technologies were designed for the crushing pressures of deep ocean environments. They are highly resistant to damage and very difficult to detect. Perhaps these systems could be useful for protecting human vessels as well." A representative from the Ironback mining collectives, whose people resembled walking boulders, rumbled their agreement. "Our ships are built for breaking apart asteroids and mining operations. They are not pretty but they are incredibly tough. We know how to destroy things that seem indestructible." When news of these secret meetings reached the Galactic Council, the response was swift and angry. Chancellor Vexani of the Centauri Alliance held an emergency session to address what they called dangerous destabilization activities. "Earth is encouraging rebellion among species that should remain in their assigned territories," the Chancellor declared to the assembled delegates. "These minor civilizations are disrupting established trade routes and threatening galactic stability. They must return to their proper places immediately." But it was already too late to stop what had been set in motion. The alliance was forming organically, held together not by formal treaties or trade agreements, but by something much simpler and stronger. It was built on the shared experience of being dismissed and ignored, and the newfound hope that together they could be more than the sum of their individual parts. Captain Elena Rodriguez led the first joint mission to test their new cooperation. The goal was to evacuate the last group of Kethani survivors from a hidden colony that had managed to avoid detection by hegemony forces. "This is unlike anything I have ever seen," Dr. Hayes reported as their small fleet approached the target system. "We have 12 ships from 6 different species, and somehow they are all working together perfectly." The Zephyrian vessels provided long-range reconnaissance, using their knowledge of hidden space routes to avoid hegemony patrols. The Aquarian ships used their advanced sensor jamming technology to hide the fleet's approach. The Ironback mining vessels positioned themselves to run interference if enemy ships appeared. "The coordination is incredible," Elena observed as she watched the operation unfold. "Each species is contributing exactly what they do best, and nobody is trying to take command or claim superiority." The evacuation was completed without a single casualty, but more importantly, it proved that the alliance could actually work in practice. Species that had never cooperated before, that had been taught to compete for scraps from the major powers, were learning to function as a unified force. As the combined fleet returned to their secret base, Elena realized they had accomplished something truly unprecedented. They had taken the galaxy's unwanted and forgotten peoples and forged them into a force that even the mighty hegemony empire would have to take seriously. "Captain," Ryan reported as they docked at the hidden station, "we are receiving congratulations from resistance cells throughout hegemony space. News of our successful mission is spreading through the underground networks." Elena smiled as she watched human engineers working alongside Kethani biotechnicians, Zephyrian mechanics, and Aquarian systems specialists. "Ryan, I think we have just proven something very important." "What is that, Captain?" "That when people who have been pushed around finally decide to push back together, they can become pretty unstoppable." The hegemony empire had built their power on a simple assumption, that the strong would always dominate the weak, and the weak would accept their domination as natural law. Their entire civilization was based on the idea that might makes right. But they had never faced an enemy that completely rejected that fundamental premise. They had never encountered people who refused to accept that being weak meant staying weak. As reports of the growing alliance reached Hegemony High Command, Admiral Korthax and his staff began to realize they were dealing with something entirely new. This was not a conventional military threat that could be crushed through superior firepower. This was an idea that was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire, the idea that nobody had to accept abandonment and oppression as their permanent fate. And ideas, as every empire throughout history had learned, were much harder to destroy than fleets or armies. The hegemony was about to discover what happened when the forgotten peoples of the galaxy finally remembered they had voices, and decided to use them all at once. The hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal predators, their black hulls blotting out the stars around Earth's solar system. Admiral Patricia Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Terra's shield, watching through tactical displays as 12 massive dreadnoughts accompanied by over 100 support vessels took up attack positions. "Admiral, enemy fleet composition is even larger than our intelligence predicted," reported her tactical officer, Commander Robert Kim. "Those dreadnoughts are each capable of reducing a planet to ash." Around Earth, the most unlikely armada in galactic history waited in defensive positions. Human ships flew alongside Zephyrian asteroid vessels, Aquarian deep-sea craft, and converted ironback mining ships. It looked less like a proper military fleet and more like a collection of refugees and misfits. Which, Patricia reflected grimly, was exactly what they were. "Admiral, the Hegemony flagship is transmitting a message," reported Communications Officer Jennifer Walsh. "Put it on screen," Patricia ordered. The main display filled with the imposing figure of Admiral Korthax, the Hegemony's supreme naval commander. His reptilian features showed cold contempt as he looked at the human admiral. His yellow eyes seemed to glow with predatory satisfaction. "Primitive humans," Korthax spoke in perfect English, his voice carrying the arrogance of someone who had never known defeat. "You have assembled an amusing collection of galactic refuse to defend your pathetic world. You have exactly 1 hour to surrender the Kethani refugees and dissolve this ridiculous alliance you have created." Patricia kept her expression calm, though her heart was racing. "Admiral Korthax, you are in violation of Earth's sovereign space. Withdraw your forces immediately." The alien commander's laughter was like grinding metal. "Withdraw? Human, look at your fleet. Your entire military is smaller than my escort squadrons. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your allies are species that we have dismissed as irrelevant for good reason. What possible threat could any of you represent to the Hegemony Empire?" "I guess you are about to find out," Patricia replied, then cut the transmission. The battle began at exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, Earth Standard Time. The Hegemony fleet advanced in perfect formation, their tactics refined through centuries of conquest against civilized opponents. They expected the human alliance to break and scatter at the first display of real military power. Instead, they encountered something they had never faced before, an enemy that refused to fight according to conventional rules. The Zephyrian nomad ships struck first, swarming around the massive Hegemony vessels like angry insects. Their ships were small and fast, built from converted asteroids and salvaged equipment. They looked like junk compared to the elegant Hegemony dreadnoughts. But they fought like nothing the Hegemony had ever encountered. "Zephyrian attack patterns are completely unpredictable," reported Captain Elena Rodriguez from her position leading the human task force. "They are using hit-and-run tactics that make no sense according to military doctrine, but they are working." The nomad fleets had learned their fighting style through generations of survival in hostile space. They struck without warning, disappeared before retaliation could arrive, and attacked again from completely different angles. Their tactics had been developed not for conquest, but for survival against overwhelming odds. Hegemony lead vessel is reporting power fluctuations in their primary systems, Engineer Marcus Webb announced from his monitoring station aboard the Terra's shield. The Aquarian pressure mines are having an effect. Their shields were not designed to handle that kind of variable stress. The Aquarian contribution to the battle was almost invisible but devastatingly effective. Their deep-sea technology created weapons that worked by manipulating pressure and density rather than direct energy attacks. Hegemony shields, designed to stop conventional weapons, proved inadequate against attacks that worked at the molecular level. But the real surprise came when the ironback mining vessels engaged the enemy fleet directly. "My God," whispered Dr. Rebecca Hayes as she watched the tactical display, "they are ramming the Hegemony ships." The ironback vessels were crude and ugly, designed for breaking apart asteroids rather than space combat. But what they lacked in elegance they made up for in sheer destructive power. Their mining equipment, built to cut through solid rock, proved remarkably effective at tearing through hegemony armor and shields. "They are treating our ships like mining obstacles," laughed Captain Tommy Chin over the communication system. "And their equipment is specifically designed to destroy anything that gets in their way." For the first time in over a century, a hegemony fleet was being forced to adapt their tactics during battle. Admiral Korthax had expected to face a conventional opponent that would fight according to established military principles. Instead, he found himself dealing with enemies who seemed to make up their strategy as they went along. But the technological gap was still enormous. Despite their initial success and creative tactics, the Alliance fleet was taking heavy casualties. The hegemony's superior firepower was systematically destroying the smaller Allied vessels. "Admiral, we are losing ships faster than we can replace them," Commander Kim reported grimly. "At this rate, we will not be able to maintain defensive positions much longer." That was when Elder Thaynara made her desperate gambit. "Admiral Rodriguez," came the Kethani Elder's voice over the emergency communication channel, "I need immediate transport to Earth's moon. There is something my people can do, but I must reach the lunar surface." "Elder, that is impossible. The space around the moon is crawling with hegemony fighters. It would be suicide to attempt a landing." "Trust me, Admiral. This is why the Kethani have survived for millions of years. We do not just grow plants. We reshape worlds." Despite the overwhelming danger, a small escort managed to get Thaynara's transport to the moon's surface. What happened next defied every known law of physics and engineering that human science understood. Using ancient Kethani terraforming techniques that had been perfected over countless generations, the Elder began to transform the lunar surface itself. Rock and metal flowed like water, reshaping according to her will. The moon's very composition was being altered at the molecular level. "Admiral, you need to see this," Dr. Hayes called out in amazement. "She is turning the entire moon into some kind of weapon platform." Massive structures began rising from the lunar surface, grown rather than built. They looked organic but functioned with technological precision. The moon itself was becoming a living fortress, powered by its own transformed matter. "Impossible," Admiral Korthax snarled as his sensors detected the transformation. "No species has that level of matter manipulation capability." The lunar defense platforms opened fire with beams of concentrated energy that seemed to bend space itself. The attacks worked at the atomic level, disrupting the fundamental forces that held matter together. Hegemony shields, designed to withstand conventional weapons, proved completely useless against technology that attacked the basic structure of reality. One by one, the mighty hegemony dreadnoughts began to retreat as their hulls started dissolving under the lunar bombardment. "This is impossible." Korthax raged as his flagship's armor began to fail. "We are the hegemony. We do not retreat from primitive species." But retreat they did. For the first time in centuries, a hegemony fleet was forced to withdraw in defeat. Admiral Korthax's final transmission was filled with humiliation and rage. "This victory means nothing, humans. We will return with forces that will crush your alliance and reduce your world to cosmic dust. The hegemony does not forget, and we do not forgive." As the enemy fleet disappeared into hyperspace, an incredible silence settled over the Earth system. On the surface of the planet, billions of humans looked up at their moon, which now glowed with new structures that had not existed hours before. "Admiral," came a weak transmission from Elder Thaynara on the lunar surface. "The immediate threat has passed. But this is only the beginning. The hegemony will not accept this defeat quietly." Patricia Rodriguez looked around at the damaged but victorious Allied fleet. Ships from a dozen different species floated together in Earth's orbit, their crews celebrating the impossible victory they had achieved together. "Maybe that is true, Elder," Patricia replied. "But they have just learned something very important. They learned that when the forgotten peoples of the galaxy finally decide to fight back together, even the mighty can fall." Across the galaxy, news of the impossible victory spread like wildfire through underground networks and resistance cells. The hegemony empire, thought to be invincible, had been defeated by an alliance of species they had dismissed as worthless. If Earth and its ragtag collection of allies could stand against the hegemony and win, perhaps the established order was not as permanent as everyone had believed. In hidden bases and oppressed colonies throughout hegemony space, rebellions began to stir. The age of accepting domination as inevitable was coming to an end. 8 months had passed since the Battle of Earth, and Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the Liberation, watching the most incredible sight of her career unfold before her. The fleet stretching out in all directions was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Human ships flew in formation with vessels from over 50 different species, their crews working together as if they had been allies for centuries instead of months. "Admiral, we are receiving reports from the Kethani terraforming teams on New Verdania," announced her communications officer, Lieutenant David Martinez. "The first phase of planetary restoration is complete, and they finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule." Elena smiled as she looked at the data streaming across her displays. The Kethani, now safe and protected by the growing alliance, had begun sharing their incredible terraforming knowledge with everyone who had helped them. Dead worlds that had been barren for centuries were blooming with new life, providing homes for refugees and expanding living space for all their allied species. "Any updates from President Chen's diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim territories?" Elena asked. "Yes, ma'am. 5 more independent systems have formally requested to join the Solidarity Accords. The Centauri Alliance is facing massive internal rebellions, and their government has sent envoys requesting peace negotiations." The Solidarity Accords had become much more than anyone had originally imagined. What started as a simple agreement to protect the Kethani had evolved into the foundation of an entirely new kind of interstellar organization. Instead of the old system where major powers dominated through military might and fear, the Accords were based on mutual aid and shared defense. Elder Thainera, now serving as the Coalition's chief advisor on interspecies relations, had helped write the document's core principle. No species shall stand alone in their hour of need, and none shall be abandoned to face extinction without aid. "Admiral, you need to see the latest reports from our engineering teams," came Dr. Marcus Webb's excited voice over the communication system. Elena made her way to the engineering section, where Marcus was practically glowing with enthusiasm. The combination of human adaptability, Kethani biotechnology, and contributions from dozens of other species had produced innovations that no single civilization could have achieved alone. "Look at this," Marcus said, gesturing to technical displays that showed ships unlike anything previously imagined. "We have developed vessels that can literally repair themselves during battle. The Kethani growth technology combined with human engineering has created starships that can adapt to new threats and even reproduce themselves when needed." "You are talking about living starships," Elena said in amazement. "Exactly. The hegemony's advantage in numbers becomes meaningless when our ships can grow new components as needed and even create new vessels from available materials." But the most significant changes were happening in the territories that had once been under hegemony control. As coalition liberation forces freed world after world, they encountered species that had been enslaved for generations, their cultures nearly destroyed by centuries of oppression. "It is incredible to witness," reported Dr. Rebecca Hayes, who had become the coalition's chief specialist in helping liberated civilizations. "These species are rediscovering their own identities, their art forms, their languages. Some had not been allowed to speak their native tongues for hundreds of years. The liberation missions had become a coordinated effort involving every member of the growing alliance. Human tactical expertise combined with Zephyrian mobility, Aquarian stealth technology, and ironback determination had proven devastatingly effective against hegemony occupation forces. The psychological impact is as important as the military victories," observed Captain Ryan Mitchell, who now commanded his own vessel in the Liberation Fleet. "When oppressed people see that someone is actually willing to fight for their freedom, it gives them hope to resist on their own." The hegemony empire itself was fragmenting under the pressure. Admiral Korthax had been removed from command after his humiliating defeat at Earth, and various hegemony sectors were either declaring independence or actively seeking to join the coalition. "The irony is beautiful," President Chen had remarked during his last visit to the fleet. "The hegemony built their entire empire on the philosophy that might makes right. But when the oppressed finally united their might, the hegemony's power became irrelevant." Captain Tommy Chen brought news of their latest liberation mission as his ship docked with the Liberation. "Admiral, the Korani homeworld is completely free. Their people actually have a tradition that tears of joy can only be shed on home soil. There was not a dry eye on the planet when we lowered their original flag for the first time in 3 centuries. Elena felt a deep satisfaction as she looked out at the diverse fleet around her. Humanity had gone from being a minor species struggling to find its place in galactic politics to becoming the catalyst for the most significant transformation in galactic civilization in recorded history. "Admiral," came Elder Thainera's gentle voice over the communication system, "we are receiving reports from monitoring stations across the galaxy. The liberation movement has spread far beyond our direct involvement. Species that have been hiding or oppressed for centuries are openly joining our cause. Elena nodded, thinking about the chain reaction that had started with her simple decision to rescue refugees when everyone else had turned away. Elder, when you first sent out that distress call from Verdania, did you ever imagine it would lead to all this? Never, Thaynara replied with what sounded like wonder in her voice. We only hoped that someone somewhere might care enough to help us survive. We never dreamed that our rescue would inspire an entire galaxy to remember what it means to stand together. The first Liberation Day celebration was held on Earth, with representatives from over 200 species gathering to commemorate not just the rescue of the Kethani, but the birth of a new era in galactic civilization. President Chen's speech to the massive gathering was broadcast across the galaxy on every available communication channel. Today we celebrate not victory in war, but victory over the idea that the weak must accept their weakness forever. We celebrate the principle that when someone calls for help, the answer should always be the same: we stand with you. As the celebration continued around her, Elena received a message that made her smile broadly. It came from the former hegemony capital world, where a coalition of liberated species was establishing a new government based on the principles of the Solidarity Accords. The message was simple but powerful: thank you for showing us that no one has to stand alone. Elena looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy there were still species facing oppression, still voices calling for help in the darkness. But now those voices would be answered. The transformation had spread far beyond anything they had originally planned. What started as a rescue mission for one endangered species had become a galactic revolution based on a simple human principle: that everyone deserves someone willing to stand up for them when times get dark. Admiral, came a report from the communication station, we are receiving requests for assistance from 12 different systems. Species facing various forms of oppression, asking if the coalition will help them. Elena smiled as she thought about humanity's response. It would be the same response they had given to Elder Thaynara's desperate plea for help, the same response they had given to every species that had asked for aid. Send them our standard reply, Elena ordered. Tell them that no one fights alone anymore. Tell them we stand with them. The age of abandonment was over. The age of solidarity had begun. And at the center of it all was a simple human truth that had transformed an entire galaxy. When someone needs help, you help them regardless of the cost. Humanity's promise to the Kethani had become the foundation of a new galactic civilization where the strong protected the weak, where diversity was celebrated instead of feared, and where no one ever had to face extinction alone. Children across hundreds of worlds would grow up in a galaxy where calling for help meant someone would always answer, where being different was not a reason for persecution, and where the words, "We stand with you," had become the most powerful force in the universe. D&D.